Welcome back to We Understood That Reference. The MCU is vast and spans over 10 years of movies, and today we're going to be looking back at the best moments. I'm Clayburn.
And I'm Nikhil.
We're talking about 20-something movies here, so even the most serious fans probably can't remember every single moment, but there are definitely a lot that stick out. Before we get into those, though, I thought it'd be interesting to see which movie from the MCU do you think probably has the most moments that really stand out? The most quotable lines, the most memorable moments. Which movie do you think that would be?
I think it's the first Avengers movie, for sure.
Yeah, so the first Avengers movie you think has the most quotable lines and all of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. It's like the most iconic, and I think that was kind of the moment when it went from being like just a movie to being like a pop culture kind of moment.
Yeah, I can see that because, like you said, that's when it really flipped the script in terms of these were just superhero movies, and then this became something, bigger than any individual superhero movie. And so there's a lot of great moments from that, I'm sure. But I kind of feel like Endgame and Black Panther are probably up there. Mm-hmm. And they kind of probably benefit too from being more recent. So obviously they're like fresher in people's minds. But also I think, Marvel started to get the hang of it a bit better as well once they kind of knew what they're doing with this MCU.
That's right.
They kind of messed up maybe with Avengers, the second one, not so great, but what they did with Infinity War and Endgame and a lot of that kind of era of movies just in general started really getting better, I think.
Oh, absolutely. They really elevated the genre in their last few years, and you can see it in the popularity in the box office, and they're the just the online chatter, and it's just been growing exponentially.
Yeah. So from the Avengers, then what do you think is the most memorable moment for you from the Avengers?
That moment when they all get together and the camera pans around them right before the final battle begins.
Yeah. So one of those kind of iconic, really kind of like a Michael Bay shot. Isn't he famous for those kind of moments where the camera sort of spins around everyone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's iconic because exactly what I was talking about, even with that weak description.
Yeah, well, it's such a overused GIF and clip and even picture, right? Anytime you see an article written about the MCU, they used that shot of the Hulk and Black Widow and everyone all lined up and posing. So that moment definitely stands out, and I think added to it is the fact that that is where, like you said, they all came together, and it's that movie, and that was the culmination of all these other kind of standalone superhero movies, and now in that moment is really when the MCU shifted into being much bigger thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I even remember that shawarma sales went up an exponential amount in 2012 after the Avengers came out.
Yeah, I guess that's a good follow-up. What's the best end credit scene?
Oh, good question. I think that,
it's probably hard to beat shawarma, right?
Yeah, I kind of like the one at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home. Spoilers.
Which was that?
The one with J. Jonah Jameson and the secret reveal.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that one stands out because it's such like you said, spoilers basically. Mm-hmm. That's rare. Usually the end credit scenes are just kind of funny one-off gags like the shawarma,
right.
Or they're very very short, simple setups, like when we saw Thanos or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Little hints at something to come. But that was a whole scene with also a very significant reveal that Peter Parker's identity is out there now.
Right. Yeah, it totally changes not only the Spider-Man franchise going forward, but just the tone of those stories and what they're able to do with him. Yeah,
and also introducing J. Jonah Jameson. Yeah, so great.
I mean, I liked it. I liked that J.K. Simmons is back in the role, but I'm not really sure if I like the whole the way they've changed the Daily Bugle,
how they modernized it into
fringe.
I don't know. I think I said this in a previous episode with regards to DC's take on Lex Luthor, where they updated him to be a tech billionaire, and I'm looking forward to it because it's a good character, and he's also just such a great actor. I loved how he played it before originally, but I think it makes sense to update it for modern times, because that character doesn't exist anymore. We don't know who this kind of outspoken newspaper editor guy is. Those don't exist these days because newspapers are dying. The real people who have that kind of journalistic power, pseudo-journalistic power, I guess, because it's more of a tabloid or something. But the people who have that power now is something like an InfoWars or these online influencers.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But I feel like the Daily Bugle was such a big part of both the comics and a lot of the original trilogy.
Yeah, it really changes that.
And you'll never get the dynamic between Peter Parker, J. Jonah Jameson, and Spider-Man, like that three-way kind of triangle.
Yeah, because they kind of skip it, right? It's basically skipped.
Yeah.
But that's interesting, because I like how the MCU's not afraid to just reinvent stories altogether. So I think it's nice to get something fresh and new, but I can see you're missing out on the iconic Spider-Man banter, I guess, between those two. Speaking of Spider-Man, then he's obviously new to the MCU, or somewhat new. Do you have any favorite Spider-Man moments so far?
Good question. My favorite, the do a flip moment. Do you remember that?
The which moment?
In the first one, when he's out and he's talking to like some hot dog vendor, and then the hot dog vendor says, "You're Spider-Man, right?" And he's like, "Yeah," and he's great. Do a flip.
Oh, yeah. I like the maybe this is my bias as a fan of Lego, but I like his sidekick buddy friend when he drops his Death Star.
Oh yeah.
His Lego Death Star. I think that was the second one, right? That was Far From Home.
No, I think that's the first one actually.
Oh, it is.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
he's like in a room. Oh yeah, I guess that would make sense, because he probably wouldn't take his Death Star to Europe with him, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that was a good one. Speaking of which, I guess obviously there's a lot of funny scenes, funny moments throughout. I guess when you think of MCU, you don't really think comedy, but they've done a pretty good job, I think, of mixing kind of traditional superhero kind of action stuff with pretty funny moments. Do you have any favorite funny moments from the MCU? Which ones made you laugh the most?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a lot. I would say that I think like the Spider-Man movies are pretty funny, along with like some of the Avengers movies, especially the first one has a lot of good jokes.
Yeah, that's where the I understood that reference, right? Is that the first use of it?
Yep. Yeah. That's where we got our name.
yeah, that is a good one, and that there's a lot of comedy to mine, I think, in early on in Steve Rogers and his kind of blast from the past mentality.
That was always fun, especially like in the first Avengers movie and the Winter Soldier too. Like the moments of levity in that movie were kind of from Steve Rogers and him not knowing anything.
Yeah. So you think Spider-Man is the funniest? Would you say the funniest movie or franchise?
Yeah, I would say, in my opinion, like the funniest franchise. I think that it has that like lightheartedness that a lot of the other ones don't.
I think it does a good job of carrying that through the whole Spider-Man films. They're always less severe, less maybe stressful and dramatic as the rest. They still have a lot of a lot at stake, and they have the drama and the action and fighting.
Yeah.
But I guess him being younger, it makes it feel a little more light.
Yeah, that's true. I still remember the beginning of Far From Home. He's like, I have a plan to like get Mary Jane, and he has like this big elaborate plan that he's explaining to Ned.
I like. I'm gonna say Ant-Man. I think Ant-Man's probably the best humor-wise overall. Like, probably doesn't fit in great as in like the best franchise of the bunch, but I think there's a lot of humor there, particularly because of Michael Pena.
Yes,
his character is hilarious. And that actor is so surprising. I watched him in some other movie on Netflix, and it's so serious and dramatic. It's basically like he's just playing this working class dystopian type guy, and nothing in that movie was funny at all. And then to go to, you know, see him in Ant-Man, where he's such a hilarious guy, specifically when he tells those stories. Do you remember his story scenes, or he has like two of those, and the first one, you know, the first one's great, and then the second time around is just amazing because it's such a perfect like callback. And like I wish they would do like some kind of like webisodes with him just explaining MCU moments. Like if he would just retell the story of all the different MCU movies as like a catch up for fans, that would be a great way to frame it.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, they should start every movie with a recap. You know, like in TV shows they have like previously on. So on the show, you know, before every movie they should have him.
And then he'd be like, he'd come in and he'd be like, yeah, man, so recap. So I was talking to my homie, this guy, and then he told him that his sister was over here talking to so-and-so, and they saw this guy Thanos, and he was like, just that whole way he tells it. And also the cutting between really fast and having his like voice coming out of the other actors as they're basically saying the lines. That's good. But I would also say that other than Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy is up there too. Like those Guardians of the Galaxy, I think works better overall. But it's also such a hilarious franchise. Particularly, you know, obviously Chris Pratt is great, and Rocket has some good moments. But I think Drax really steals it in terms of comedy.
Oh yeah, especially in the second one, I think Drax really takes off, and in Infinity War too, he has a lot of great moments in that movie as well. Yeah,
the only problem for me is I have a hard time remembering, you know, which movie all these things come from, and especially now that they've been involved in the Avengers like crossover stuff now. So sometimes, you know, I know it's a Guardians character, but maybe it was from, you know, Endgame or something. But I think probably my favorite, I don't know, there's so many great Drax moments, but I think the one that got the biggest laugh for me was the mantis, look out, after she gets smacked by the whatever it was, meteor or something. That was just so hilarious and unexpected. And then of course I think another big one that's probably more famous, probably I would say the most popular Drax funny moment is the "Why is Gamora?"
Oh yes. And did you know that moment was actually, it wasn't in the script, that was just
I heard that he improvised it, right? That's a great line, especially the you know, and the tense nature of that scene with you know, the Avengers, I guess, meeting the Guardians for the first time, and they're fighting each other, and I forget who's being held hostage. Spider-Man, is he being held by?
That's right.
Chris Pratt, and he has a gun to his head, and then and Iron Man's there, and they're like, you know, fighting each other, and then it's just like, where is Gamora? Who is Gamora? I'll do you one better. Why is Gamora? Yeah, that's a good one. He has a lot of great moments. Also another one that it wasn't as funny the first time around, but I like it because of the callback. There's a part where he says something about having sensitive nipples.
Oh yeah.
And that line itself is a funny line, but it also just feels too kind of left field, and it's like it's almost like too easy. Like, oh, you're just saying something silly. Okay, whatever. But the fact that then there's a callback when he puts on the vest thing or whatever it is, and he says, "Ow, my nipples." So because it had the setup and then the perfect payoff, that works really well. But if it was just him, you know, the one-off of saying he has sensitive nipples, it wouldn't have been as good.
Oh yeah, so true.
Yeah. Who would you say would be the funniest character then, overall?
Oh, overall.
Like I said like Michael Pena, and probably Pena and Drax probably are like in my top, like in terms of comedy relief, pure humor. I think those two are probably tied for first place for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like I think those are the two kind of where their sole purpose is kind of comedy relief to an extent. I think a lot of the other main characters are pretty funny, like definitely Iron Man, you know, Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, the only thing there is I feel Tony Stark's his lines, his attitude, everything kind of starts to blend together, you know. So it feels like it's always just kind of a parody of Tony Stark at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
What about the cat from
from
Captain Marvel? That was a pretty good some pretty good comedy from that cat.
Yeah, for sure. Although I was expecting so much more about the story of Nick Fury's eye patch than
No, I think that was a nice. I don't know. They kind of like pull the rug out from under you in a way, because you are expecting it to be some grand reveal at some point, and then this turns out to be what it is.
Yeah.
So they answered the question everyone had on their mind.
They did.
I feel like that question. That movie doesn't get a lot of love. Then it had some really good moments in it, particularly because of Nick Fury. I think Nick Fury is such a great character, and he got a lot of screen time on that.
That's right.
What's been your favorite Nick Fury moment?
In Far From Home, when he's trying to recruit Spider-Man, and he's like, oh, I'm just your friendly, neighborhood, and he's like, bitch, you've been to space.
Yeah. The best Nick Fury moments, I think, come from when he's really kind of walking that line of being Samuel L. Jackson. It's those kind of winks to that character, like even before he gets dusted at the end of Infinity War as well, and it cuts off that the famous Samuel L. Jackson word.
Oh right, yeah. I mean, he's a really good character, and he's been around. He's been around since like the beginning, all 23 movies, and it was cool that like you finally got a lot of good character development from him so far down the line. Yeah, especially with the Captain Marvel movie, where he got quite a bit. Are there any characters who maybe didn't get quite as much screen time as like Nick Fury, but these side characters who are the most memorable ones that stand out, sort of like the Cat or Michael Pena, which characters are just really good, even though they're not the main cast? Well, I think we need more Michael Pena in Ant-Man 3.
Yeah,
I think I honestly think they really need to bring in a new director for the third one. I heard that they're not, and they're bringing Peyton Reed back, but I really wish that they would get a new, kind of new creative juices in that movie, because like they have a lot of good stuff to work with. I just feel that it's not living up to its potential, and they need more Michael Pena. They need to like get him his own like Disney Plus series or something. Yeah, I think it'd be great if they could actually have him become a superhero somehow, like they did with Mackie. Oh yeah. So just he's a side guy, he's a side character. Have him, even if he inherits the suit from Ant-Man whenever he gets tired of it, or there's plenty of superheroes in the Marvel world. I'm sure he could fall into some gamma rays or something and get some cool powers. Yeah, that's a great idea. I really am on board with that. But Paul Rudd's immortal, so I don't think that he'll ever give up the suit. yeah, he won't be retiring. So what about the best lines? There's a ton of lines. Obviously, we already talked about the "I understood that" reference line, which has become a meme and has inspired the name of this podcast. But what other iconic lines? What are the most iconic lines from the MCU so far? Oh, there's so many. I think the "I am Iron Man" is like an iconic line, because it's just like the kind of the bookends of the the first movie and the end game. What else? Wakanda Forever. There's also that. Oh yes, yeah, for sure. And the way that movie just became a pop culture like phenomenon was pretty amazing. Yeah, I feel like people are going to be tricked in real life into thinking Wakanda is a real country, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of kids don't realize it's fictional. Oh yeah, for sure. I'm pretty sure there have already been people who have called Wakanda a real country. Yeah, and I'm sure Thanos probably has a lot of quotable lines as well. I think people like to say the something like "all things in balance" or whatever that line is that he says, his philosophy. And should have gone for the head. I'm surprised that there aren't as many catchphrases, because like to me it seems like catchphrases are pretty common for like I don't know, like superhero stuff, or you would think that there'd be catchphrases, and like Wakanda Forever is a great catchphrase for Black Panther, but it seems like he's the only one that really has one. Like obviously Spider-Man's kind of catchphrases are the line about with great power comes great responsibility, and the other iconic one is the
the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And they've referenced both of those. They don't really overuse them or anything like that. But Wakanda Forever is a really good catchphrase, but you don't really hear much from anyone else. Like what's Tony Stark's catchphrase or Captain America's catchphrase?
Well, Captain America has "I can do this all day."
Right, he said that a few times.
And what else? Because like the power of that callback was that when he was a kid and getting beat up in an alley, he used to like stand up for himself and used to say that I can do this all day. And then he
it was that determination he had, that persistence even before he had the super soldier serum. So it was really inherent in him, the real him, versus what they sort of turned him into, I guess. That makes it pretty powerful, but they don't use it enough. It seems like that could be something that if you want to make it a catchphrase, it would be more than just a couple moments, the setup and the callback. That it would be kind of like Star Wars is I have a bad feeling about this, where it would be kind of a running line through the series.
Oh, I think Marvel's a little careful not to like overdo certain things, otherwise it becomes a little tacky.
Yeah, but I would think it would help with merchandising.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. But I feel like even in Endgame, they were kind of making fun of themselves a little bit. There was a lot of like self-referential gags going on in Endgame. So
other than lines, it is a superhero franchise, so there's a lot of fighting and action. What would you say the best fight scene? And I feel like I know what you're going to say. The best fight scene in the MCU so far.
Wait, you know what I'm going to say? I'm not even sure.
I think so. I think I know what you're going to say.
Probably the ending scene in Endgame. Is that what you thought I was going to say?
No, I thought you would say Civil War, the Civil War battle between everybody. Everyone's fighting it out.
Yeah, that's a good one too. That's probably second.
I don't know. Like to me, the end game. You know how I mentioned before. I don't like how the MCU does too much fighting faceless bad guys, and that was the issue with the end game too. It was cool that they brought everybody back, but they brought a bunch of heroes back just to punch a bunch of random aliens in the face. And it's better when you have the real people fighting, like Civil War. Works sort of better for that because they're real people. But the other side of it is they're all the heroes, so nobody's gonna die. So that takes away some of the stakes of the actual fighting. But it still looks really cool to see everyone fighting each other. Right.
Except Rhodey almost did. War Machine.
Yeah, I think it was a mistake to not have killed him. But because that's the issue is that they don't kill people off enough just in general in the MCU, and that might be true in comics. In general, or if they do kill people off, they write them back in somehow because they got to keep milking that franchise and that character. But it would raise the stakes more when people can die.
True.
So what about visuals? So we talked a little bit about the CGI stuff, and they kind of look funny whenever they're doing the de-aging. Although I think they did a pretty good job with Hank Pym. I thought his de-aging probably worked the best. In the Ant-Man movie, but so far in terms of like just visuals, just really cool scenes, cool looking scenes, what have been the best for you?
Oh, great question.
It could be fighting, it could be whatever, just like this is an awesome scene, a beautiful scene.
I think that Infinity War and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 were the best visually stunning movies out of
I liked a lot of the ego stuff. I don't know if you're referring to that for Guardians 2 or not, but the ego, everything that was the planet, even the whole Pac-Man thing, as stupid as it was, just all of that kind of creating stuff from their imagination, and it was all really good. And I think Guardians in general, just because it's out in space, has some pretty cool scenes just with those planets and things. But I also think Doctor Strange had some pretty cool visuals as well with I guess it kind of seems kind of like Inception sort of, but how they had the folding buildings and all of that. That looked pretty cool. And the Dormammu fight or whatever it was, where he was constantly going back in time and facing him in different ways. I thought those are pretty good visuals there.
Yeah, it was really cool the way they like in some of the scenes they like paid homage to Steve Ditko and like the like 1960s like psychedelic art that he used to do. That was really cool.
Yeah, and we talked a little about the that spinning shot of the Avengers from the original movie as well, and that was a really good good visual scene there too, and it was early on, but I think in general the MCU hasn't been very strong in terms of visuals really, and it seems odd because comic books are very visual, and you would think that they would have a lot more of those kind of iconic picture scenes basically.
Oh yeah.
And that was like the only time that really stood out early on. Everything else, like the Iron Man movies, they were made just very much like your standard movie would be made, right? Like there wasn't a lot of those Michael Bay type shots. As corny as Michael Bay movies are, he does have that style to him, which I would say is a little more what you would need in terms of comic book, because he really frames the characters in a way that he does that spinning shot and he has the camera looking up at them and it makes the characters really stand out.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't a lot of that in early MCU stuff, but then I think they got better at it, and certainly a lot of the more recent ones have those better shots of characters where you just look at it and say, oh, this is a badass moment right now.
Oh yeah, you're totally right. I think that in the first Spider-Man, the Spider-Man Homecoming, there was that moment where he he's trapped under some debris, like the warehouse he's in collapses, and he has to like lift himself up. They were trying to recreate like one of the iconic moments from the books, and I don't think it really worked.
It feels, because the visuals probably aren't as strong. Like I don't know, I didn't see the comic, I don't know the story there, but you can't just like take the story from a comic and then just make it out like a normal movie. Like
yeah.
It needs to have a stronger visual, and it just felt like they were always playing it very safe in terms of the visual look, even to the point where the colors, it's very desaturated look. There's not as colorful as comic book characters usually are, and that's why like Guardians of the Galaxy really stands out, because that was one of the first ones where they really went a different direction and they had color and they had a lot of nice visuals. But of course, it's easy, I guess, when you literally have characters who are different colors. But you could have done that with Captain America's suit. Didn't have to be so dull. And Iron Man's suit even is dull. Like, why can't it be a brighter red? Why can't Captain America's shield be brighter and colorful and stand out? Instead, it looks kind of dark and desaturated.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. A lot of the earlier movies were a lot more desaturated, a lot duller, like the color scheme. And then around around 2017, around like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, there was kind of this shift where the overall aesthetic of the movies became brighter and more colorful, and I think the reason they did that in the beginning was to give it a more realistic look, because in the beginning they didn't want to make it too colorful, because that kind of made it seem a little too
well, and that was the style back then too. It was probably fresh off of like Batman Begins and those kind of things where people expect realism. And so they kind of, I think, went too far. I mean, I'm glad they didn't go the super realistic, gritty route, but still, the DC universe did the same thing with like Superman being very, very dark and dull, and it just doesn't really make sense. But they've gotten better at it now, especially with, I think, Thor Ragnarok. Thor before had been a lot darker, and now Thor Ragnarok made it a lot more comic booky. They're not afraid to be kind of out there and psychedelic, I guess, and it works.
Yeah, I think it's really great. I think it's them like really owning them, like the source material, and like just kind of, I don't mean to sound tacky, but like being themselves, like owning who they are, and like if you're a comic book, be a comic book. Don't try and be a 90s action movie.
Yeah. So if we're going to talk best moments in the MCU, I think we could break it out by best moments per Chris.
Ah, yes.
Because there's Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, and Chris Pratt. So what would you say would be, let's start with Hemsworth, Chris Hemsworth's favorite or best moment in the MCU?
Oh, his best moment in the MCU. I like the part when he's giving that pep talk to what's her name? Tessa Thompson's character, Valkyrie.
Yeah.
And he's got the bowling ball, and he's giving this speech about what it means to be a hero. And then he throws the bowling ball at the window, expecting it to shatter and have this big, like, heroic moment. And then it bounces off the window and hits him in the face.
Yeah, that's a good one. For me, I guess Chris Hemsworth moments have probably been the lower points of the MCU, because
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of Thor, probably. But definitely Fat Thor has been has been a good one for me. So I think pretty much any of his Fat Thor moments have been great. What about Chris Evans? What's the top Chris Evans moment?
So I'm a big Captain America fan, so I think that there's a lot. I think that there are a lot of like iconic moments in the first Captain America movie, like when the Red Skull is like, "What makes you so special?" and he's like, "Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn." That's a good moment.
Yeah.
I love the fight scene in The Winter Soldier when it's just the two of them, and they're like on the street, and there's like the Winter Soldier has that knife, and he like stabs the van, and it's just like Chris Evans and Sebastian Stan in like hand-to-hand combat. I love that. What else did I love? All the moments in Civil War between Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. Are my favorite.
My favorite Chris Evans moment has to be him fighting himself from Endgame, when he goes back in time to steal whatever gem or whatever they're after there, whichever Infinity Stone, and he just the way it's such a great moment. Obviously, it's a funny gimmick anyway on its own, but in terms of storytelling, even just to see sort of how far he's come as a character, because it's basically him as his more jaded self, more mature and nuanced version. Yeah, meeting his old self, where he was naive. Yeah, and just this kind of do-gooder. And so it was really good for that reason too. But also, isn't that where we get the America's ass from?
Yes, exactly.
Wasn't that in that scene? Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's the winner for me for the best Chris Evans moment.
Yeah, and that's just an awesome moment in general, when you can like look back at yourself 10 years ago and be like, that guy was an idiot. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing. That means that you've grown.
You can't, if you look back at yourself 10 years ago and you're like, hey, I'm still pretty smart, then you're like, oh, so you've had no growth, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of no growth, I guess we can move on to Chris Pratt.
Oh yeah.
The best Chris Pratt moment. What would you say?
Best Chris Pratt moment. I can think of the worst Chris Pratt moment.
Okay, what's the worst easily. Chris Pratt moment?
When in Infinity War, when he hits Thanos instead of just like chilling for like 2 minutes. When they were trying to get the glove off. Yeah, and he ruined everything.
But I guess it's in line with his character, because Star-Lord is sort of, he's supposed to be kind of a self-obsessed ass, so he's not the brightest bulb. I really liked though his introduction. I think it was in the first one, when he's stealing the orb, and that the music playing and him dancing and kicking that space rat. that was a really good moment. I think it's always hard to top that, but I'm sure he's had some other good moments in there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most impressive things about the first Guardians of the Galaxy in general, is just the way that it set the tone for like all of the like MCU cosmic movies going forward, because that's a really difficult thing to do, to have that balance between something that's grandiose, something that's comical, and something that's like easily accessible. And it kind of did all three of those things, balanced all three of those things very well.
Yeah, it's still really good. Like the Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I don't think was quite as good as the first one. And then it's always great to see any of the characters in game, and however they want to be used in the MCU in general. They're all great characters. but that first movie is just so perfect.
Yeah.
That you can go back and watch that anytime, and it's a great introduction to all those characters, and just a good movie overall.
And then the scene where Rocket steals that guy's leg, I think it was.
yeah. That's a good one too.
And then the fact that they called it back in Infinity War when he wanted the Winter Soldier's arm.
Yeah, he has this thing for prosthetics.
Yeah. And then who's our third? Who's the other Chris? Did we get them all?
I think so. I mean, there's probably another Chris. It's such a common name, but those are the three big ones, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I imagine there's probably a side character that's been named Chris, but unless you want to throw in a Chris Pine moment from the DC
from Wonder Woman.
Yeah, I'd say when he blew up, that was a good moment.
That was my favorite.
Spoilers. So I think we can't really end an episode on best MCU moments without getting into sort of the guy behind it all, Stan Lee, who had cameos in all of these. Do you have a favorite Stan Lee cameo?
Yeah, so I think my favorite is the one where he's revealed to be a Watcher, like one of the Watchers.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. I guess I didn't know it was like a Watcher, but I'm guessing you're talking about when he's like up in space talking to some alien dudes.
Right.
And he's like telling them the stories that I think they all relate back to his cameos, right? Like the story he's telling is he says something about being a FedEx driver.
Yeah, that was the one from Civil War.
And that's one of his cameos. And I think that's probably one of my favorite cameos of his is that one. You said it's from Civil War?
No. So the one where he's revealed to be a Watcher is from Guardians Volume 2.
But the one where he's the FedEx driver?
And then the one where he's the FedEx. Yeah, that one is from Civil War.
Okay, yeah, that's the one I think that would probably be my favorite Stan Lee cameo because he shows up, he knocks, he says, "I got a package for Tony Stank." And I forget Captain America or whoever it is that's there. I think it's Captain America.
It was Rhodey. It was War Machine.
Oh, okay. He's like, yeah, this is Tony Stank. Yeah, it's just such a funny line.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So yours is the Watcher. I think one that stands out pretty well too, and I guess it might have been an early one. Maybe is the Hugh Hefner one, right? Was that the first one? Was that the Iron Man?
That was in Iron Man 2, I believe.
So it was pretty early. I think that's probably why it stands out so much too, is because it was one of his first MCU cameos, if not the first one. Did he have a cameo in Iron Man?
You know, I'm thinking about it right now. I don't remember if it was Iron Man or Iron Man 2. It might have actually been the first Iron Man, now that I think about it.
So that one was a good one too. I like in Ant-Man, he was in the story.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He was in the story in Michael Peña's story. So as a bartender.
Oh right.
So that was a fun one.
I also like the cameo in Spider-Man 3. This isn't the MCU, but way back in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 when he's like talking to Peter Parker. I thought that was kind of cool.
I don't remember which Spider-Man it is. I think it might have been the ones that were no good. But there's one where he has a cameo where like he's in a library or something, right? And like Spider-Man's fighting behind him and destroying everything, but he has headphones on, so he doesn't even know what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
I don't think anything can top Tony Stank, and just the way he delivers that line. It's pretty hilarious. But I do like, I forget which one he had the line about wanting his shoe back.
His shoe back.
Do you remember which one that was? I remember a Stan Lee one where. Oh, it was a Thor one. So, the professor guy from Thor. Okay. He's in a psych ward, I think, or something, and he's talking. He's like, the joke is you don't realize who he's speaking to, but he's got like a whiteboard behind him or something, and he's holding a shoe, and he's like trying to explain something to people, like he's a professor. He's got stuff written on the blackboard, and he's waving this shoe around like it's a pointer. And he's saying, I don't like no, there's aliens out here, and if you take the magic bridge here or whatever, he's going on about all this stuff, and then it pans over, and you see that he's in a psych ward, and there's just a bunch of like patients hanging around playing, dominoes or whatever, and ignoring him mostly. And one of them is Stan Lee, and he says, "Can I have my shoe back?"
Nice.
So that's a good one too. Just because of the line, just the "Can I have my shoe back?" is funny, and then whenever you realize, it was that guy was holding the shoe the whole time.
I can't believe that you talked about Thor: The Dark World in the MCU Greatest Moments episode.
Yeah. Was it? I guess it was Dark World, probably, huh?
Yeah. Because in the first Thor, he was driving that car, trying to move the hammer. He was driving the pickup truck, trying to move the hammer.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the weaker ones for me in terms of a Stan Lee cameo, because that could be anybody, really. It doesn't. There's no reason for it to be Stan Lee.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, still a good, funny moment.
Yeah, true. And then Ragnarok, he cuts his hair.
I don't remember the Ragnarok one.
Yeah, it was kind of a quick one. I also like the one in Spider-Man: Homecoming where Spider-Man's catching that car thief that's not a car thief, and then he sets off the alarm, and then suddenly pops out of his window in Queens, and he's like, keep it down there.
Yeah, he's doing his get off my lawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it's gonna be weird. I wonder how many are left. Do you know if we have any Stan Lee cameos left that he's filmed?
No, we got them all, unfortunately. Endgame was the last one. I'm
surprised. I would have thought, if I were Stan Lee, I would have told him, just put me in front of a green screen for 3 hours, and I'm gonna shoot just a ton of lines for you to use.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, he did the last.
That way, he could be in there forever.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be awesome. But I heard that he actually did the last 4 together. So he did Guardians Volume 2, the Captain Marvel, and then Infinity War and Endgame, all together. And James Gunn was the one who directed all 4 of those cameos.
So unfortunately, I guess that's the last of the Stan Lee moments that we'll have, but the MCU itself will live on far beyond him and hopefully continue to bring joy to lots of people. So there's going to be a lot more great MCU moments to come. So we could probably do another top MCU moments podcast episode, maybe who knows, 10 years from now, and see how these original best moments stack up with whatever is left to come. Be sure to tweet at us at WUTR Podcast and let us know what your best moments have been, and check out the next episode next week.